Hello and welcome to Obsessive Audio. Eric here. And yesterday, Acustica released their Green 5 Ultra Suite. And I've been playing around with it for a while, a lot of yesterday and some today. This thing is pretty amazing, and I thought I'd just hop online for a bit, do a stream. I haven't done that in a while, so I rejigged everything. Tried to do 4K streaming. YouTube didn't like it, so we're at 2K though. Hopefully the resolution is still pretty good and the sound's still pretty good. Still ironing some things out, so hopefully this is not a total disaster. But anyway, Green 5 Acustica Audio. This is based on the GML, George Massenburg Labs gear. Their very infamous 8200 EQ, the 9500 mastering version of that EQ, and their uber complex, no one quite understands it yet, DRC, Dynamic Range Controller. Let's take a look at the plugins that you get. There's 4 of them. And basically it's like the mono and the stereo versions of each. So as you get the EQ, you see all the color knobs there. It's based on the 8200 look. Think about the GML stuff, especially at the time it was groundbreaking. It was the cleanest. This is designed to be completely free, minimal artifacts as possible. No noise, no distortion, minimal phase fuckery. You get the ideas. For critical mastering applications, you just need to change the frequencies. You don't want to mess the sound up too much. So here's your 8200 EQ. The manual calls this the mono version, but obviously it will work on a stereo track in stereo, but you get one set of controls rather than the separate left and right controls, which we'll see on some of the other plugins. Here's the stereo version of that EQ. A lot of controls. I don't know if this is going to be a deep dive going into every little detail. That would probably take a very long time, but I'll do my best to try and cover some things here. Compressors, you get 2 as well. The mono version of the Dynamic Range Controller and the stereo version. And wow. What can I say? The compressors, they're psychoacoustic compressors. So it was a special circuit. It was not designed to be focused on voltage detection so much as perceptual detection. True loudness, the way that people hear, if that makes any sense at all. Why don't we go to some musical examples and start there. I've got a tune here. It's I did a little work on this. It's a acoustic tune, and it's really clean. So I wanted to show you what the filters sound like and how you can work with it. As you can see here, it's very minimal adjustments, like half a dB here and there. I'll bypass it. Off. On. Off. On. So really, really subtle. If you're listening on laptops or less than stellar earbuds, you might not even hear much of a difference, but that is the point of this gear. Let's take a look at the controls, and then, because I do want you to hear the filters and I want to play around with them, but right off the bat, you've got on the top here, you've got your presets: load, save, move A into B, copy, paste. If you know the Acustica gear, then I'm sure you are going to be familiar with that. Size options, 1 times, 1.5, or 2 times. You'll have to reload the plugin to change the size, and then it'll be set from then on in. You've got 5 bands here. They're all parametric bands by default, and then the low and the high you can switch to shelves. So you've got your gain here, You've got the bandwidth here, in and off, on and off for all of them on an individual band level, and of course the frequency selection. Input trim here affects the preamp, and it affects the preamp only. So this is a volume compensated adjustment. If you know the Acustica stuff, it allows you basically to run the internals hotter or cleaner. And if you don't have the preamp engaged, this doesn't do anything. So you do have to have the preamp engaged, and you'll get a little bit more harmonics. But again, this gear is not really about the harmonics. You might notice a just very subtle shift with this preamp, but it is definitely not about distortion. It's just sort of a tone. It's hard to describe, but there's something subtle that happens. A little bit of a placement of the sound that I did notice. It's there. But it's not like a make or break situation. I did turn it on in this case. What else do we have here? We've got mid, side, or left, right modes. So you could only on this you don't have separate left and right mid side controls. So say I only wanted to affect the mids, you could do that by clicking that, but that would affect the mids. The sides, if you want to hit the sides. That would hit both sides equally, if you get what I'm saying. So, mono controls, stereo plugin, mono controls. What else? A clean output level. This is for monitoring down here, left, right, mono, sides, or the change. And let's listen to that actually. Here's the left, right. Let's monitor only the mids, taking out all the side information. Now let's listen to only the sides. And then this delta here is the change that you're making. And so only the amount that you've EQ'd. Very quiet. In this case, it just got rather wide boost around 100 hertz and a shelf around, 4K. Again, very wide. That's going to be super quiet though. Anyway, let's go back to that. You got oversampling up here. 1 times 2x or 4 times oversampling. And over here you've got different modes. And the way Acustica described this in the manual, their products typically have been FIR for the sampling. They sample analog gear, and to get that as accurate as possible, they've been using FIR techniques, which is great for the transient portion of the signal and the immediate kind of short-term sounds. Whereas, as some of you may know, the IIR, infinite impulse response, is much better for the tails, the longer decays of the sound. So they've combined, basically hyper technology, they have combined the two elements to try and get the best out of both worlds. So, and here you can kind of play with what gets emphasized here. Hyper technology is when you load it up, that's the default. This one is still one of the best sounding modes to me, the hyper mode. They do say that if you want the most accurate high end, top end, you would go to digital 2x. And there's an echo mode if you're concerned about CPU, and then straight up digital mode. I do notice subtle shifts when you switch between these modes. So just because it says that the digital 2x is the most accurate high end, that doesn't mean that it might actually sound better in hyper mode. But those are the two that I tend to toggle between. I don't know if that difference is, it just might be too subtle for YouTube's compression to even bother with here, but I do want you to hear what these filters sound like on the EQ too. So why don't I play that track again, and I'm just going to play around with one of the bell curves. Here, you can see here the drag and drop. This is relatively new Acustica relatively new Acustica feature on their plugins. They didn't have this a few years ago. And they've been working on it. It's way smoother now. So you drag your curves just like a standard, like a fab filter or something. You can use your scroll wheel or or the 2-finger scroll on a touchpad to do the bandwidth. Down here, and I love this, it's got the keyboard with all of the notes. Super cool. If you're trying to find a note or bring a note out, or you're trying to tune your drums to the key of a song or whatever, really great. One thing I noticed about this plugin too, also, is you'll see that the spectral analyzer, it's really easy to work with. I don't know how they've done it here, but in a lot of other EQs, it just seems to move too fast or something. You got to mess around with the ballistics. I feel like this gives me a good window into what the frequency content is. Let's play with the filter though. This is as narrow as it goes. But the beauty, I think, with this unit happens when you go wider. For boosts. Cuts, it's a different story. Cuts, narrow is really good on this. Oh, that's outside of the range. Let's go to 2x and hear if we hear a difference. Hear that change? It's tighter. Let's go back. Digital 2x is tighter. But Hyper's kind of nice. It's open and, a little more fluid sounding. Anyway, when I play with this, it doesn't sound the same when I do this with your standard DAW built-in bi-quad EQs or whatever. The quality of the sound is just phenomenal. No hesitation whatsoever using this on Critical Masters. That's what the original gear was designed to do. That's what Acustica worked so hard on recreating here. While we're on the topic, by the way, of that spectrum analyzer, there's different modes that you can have. So see your frequency plot, but you can also go into a third octave graphic mode. And there is a real IIR, which I'm actually not quite sure what that does. Didn't get that far into the manual. But I'm assuming it has to do with the display here. And in terms of what I did with this particular tune, let's bypass it. I heard something that I didn't like, kind of at the 600, 5 to 700 range. Here it is bypassed. And I think it was here where I kind of figured these frequencies. That was kind of like the only thing I thought was wrong with the song. It just had too much of that going on. So, I mean, the first instinct might be, let's turn some of this other stuff off. First instinct might be, oh, well, let's just attack that frequency, right? But hear how that hollows out a lot? That's what you're doing to it. Even if you go like a half dB below, I want you to listen to the mid throw on this and how it doesn't really, it doesn't really help in the sense that things start to sound just kind of more distant, and they sound more, well, hollow's, yeah, hollow's probably the best word. Check it out. Listen to the guitar and the piano. If you hear that lost impact, I mean, we can go narrower with it, but the problem is not a narrow problem. It's a wider band where that frequency range is just too much. So, but we can try to cut it narrowly. Narrow. There's still that hollow sound that you're putting in. It's to me, it's not a great thing to do in mastering, like to kind of start cutting into your mids. If you're hearing certain resonances and you go really, really narrow, you're notching stuff out, that's a different story. But like to the overall broad program material, no. The approach that I took on this instead was say, no, I'm just going to boost the top with a shelf in this case. And let's crank that up. And we're going to play with the bandwidth here. Actually, I don't know if the shelf actually doesn't really have a bandwidth. We're going to play with the frequency of the shelf. Until it starts to get into that range that we don't like, that we're trying to de-emphasize. Right? So we're going to just bring the shelf down until we start to hear that nasty 600-700. And go back, because if we're going to make a boost, but we don't want to boost that area. We're going to boost everything around it. Is the strategy here? That's definitely too far. Maybe here. I'm not sure what I had. Let's go with that. Other thing I noticed about this tune is it has severe sub-frequencies, like I mean like down at 30 hertz and stuff. Little too much. So I did a little tiny roll-off that's probably barely noticeable there. You get it just helps a bit. Doesn't take away too much of that big feeling, but it just sort of pockets it, so you're not getting too much bleed. Maybe you might want to go in here with another EQ and do a really steep filter way down there. I don't know, but that's just what I did here. And I noticed also with the bass it had like a lot of nice low subs, but it didn't have that upper frequency range around 100 that speaks a little higher. So here is where I attempted to add a bit of that in. This range. Mainly listening to the bass. And again, the other thing that just like with the high shelf, and this time I am going to play with the bandwidth. Just to adjust that bandwidth so that it's not, I like it wide, but I don't want it so wide that it starts picking up that stuff we're trying to get rid of around 500-600. So if we got it as wide as possible. When it's wide like that, it is picking up that stuff that we don't want. So we're going to lower that. Lower the bandwidth. It's probably pretty good. I will take that down. And again, we're just going to give it like a half dB. maybe a little wider. Too wide. Let's hear it without. Forgot to mention there's a bypass right here to make things easy, make life easy. Off. On. Off. All right, so pretty subtle, probably a little too subtle for YouTube's compression and the usual listening environment, but just getting an idea of how you might want to work with this. Let's move on to another plugin here. Let's take a look. Do we want to do this? No, why don't we go for the big guy here on the compressor and see if we can tackle some of these controls quickly anyway. So along the top, the presets, size. What's important to mention about this compressor and the original dynamic range controller is that there's two gain reduction circuits. There's a fast and a slow. They work in conjunction and in tandem with each other. When you adjust one, the other one adjusts. It's part of this idea of perceptual gain reduction. And it makes the unit incredibly flexible. As a mastering, you can use it on tracks too, but again, it doesn't have a lot of distortion, or if you're looking for something to really crush your drums, I mean, this thing will go fast enough. It'll almost act like a clipper, but it's not quite the what we're used to hearing, say, from an 1176 or something like that. That's a different animal. I don't know why my computer's doing a little bit of rotation there. Okay, so we've got the size. We covered oversamplings over here. We've got attack and release for left and for right. Also on this particular unit, first thing I'll usually do is hit the control lock down here, which slaves the right side to the left side. And I'll turn that on. And what I mean by that is that the left side is going to act as your master controller on this compressor. So when I turn the left, the right will move accordingly. And a lot of the times, the converse is true. Moving the right will affect left, but on some things it doesn't, right? Like if I turn slow off here, it'll turn slow off on that side. I'll turn it back on. But if I turn slow off here, it does not turn slow off on the left side. That's something to keep in mind when using this unit. That's pretty important. Control lock, use this side as the master adjustments, and then any differences might come from here. Let's go over these. We got left-right mode or MS mode, the fast and the slow gain reduction circuits on and off. Input trim, same deal. It affects the preamp, which is switchable here, and only the preamp. If you haven't engaged the preamp, then you're not going to get much any effect. It's really only to control the harmonics from the preamp and run the internals a little hotter. You get. Or is that actually true? Wait a minute. That was true of the EQ. Let me check out something here for a minute before I just start talking shit. Let's turn it on. That helps. Start digging in a bit. Oh, it does. This does affect this does affect the amount of compression you get. So scratch that earlier part. It affects, in this case, it affects more than just the preamp. On the EQ, it only affects the preamp. All right, so that out of the way. What else we got? We got attack and release. Again, these work in conjunction, the slow and the fast. So they share attack and release controls. The manual gives you the actual milliseconds of the attack and the release, which are pretty, they're not, in this mode here with everything engaged, they're not like super fast. They're for mastering. They're going to let your transients through. However, if you turn off the slow part, the fast now becomes 30 times faster, and this thing gets super fast. Why don't we grab a beat here so you can hear what I'm talking about, how fast you can get on this if you want to. And we'll crank the ratio up. That's a lot of gain reduction now. Now let's move this attack down and the release down. Right, so yeah, you can get attacked like a pseudo clipper, which is totally not what it's designed for. But I just wanted to show you how that's microseconds fast. It's ridiculously fast if you need that. But again, the beauty of this is I don't think exists in that mode, right? Let's get a little more reasonable here. All right, so attack and release for both your fast and your slow. You've got your ratio for the fast, ratio for the slow, threshold for the fast, threshold for the slow, makeup for the fast, makeup for the slow, and a mix between fast and slow, like in terms of mixing the dry and the wet. So you can mix dry or wet into either of those. But there's also a way to blend between the two here, between fast and slow. So you get your, let's try something. Let's set up a fast. Let's go all the way to fast. Got a sidechain high-pass filters. That's just ridiculously too loud. Let's turn the makeup down. Here I'm kind of using it. I don't know. I never really quite understood everything this could do, but I'm getting better at it. Green 4 came out a few years ago. We did a Mixersys review of that as well. It's a little better. Got the SH mod, which is another classic Acustica control, which it affects the shape of the attack curve. It involves some look ahead and stuff. I think anything above 2, I think, is where you set it to get the original gear response. So you can give it more attack, or, clamp down even farther. Kind of like it here. It's a little gritty still, but let's work on the slow a little bit here. Yeah, speed that up a tad. That's also speed up what happens on the fast, but that's not a problem. I don't mind that. Let's hit this mix knob again, the blend. Let's go over it fast. And I can hear that the slow doesn't have quite as much makeup, so let's try to balance that out a bit. Right in the middle here. And this is, I think, where the input trim can come in handy, because I don't mind the way that compression sounds, but it's hitting it too hard. So let's back it off with the input trim. The bypass down here. Let's hear it bypassed. On. Anyway, so yeah, a clean way definitely to control your dynamic range and get a bit more volume out of it. Different from other compressors that you might try to use or brick wall limiters. We haven't even touched all the controls here. The metering, it's a peak meter here. You got a loudness unit meter here, right? Your EBUR 128 loudness units, full scale, LUFS. You got while we're on that, we got 3 different modes, so you can look at the integrated LUFS, the momentary LUFS, or the short-term LUFS. You can reset the meters, especially if you're doing integrated and you want to just check a section. You don't want the work you've done before to affect it, so you could reset it. You could turn the meters off. Still shows you gain reduction though. Mid-side mode. What else didn't we cover here? Oh, stereo spread. Here we go. Can widen it out. Put those drums way in the back. Or vice versa. Nice tool to have. Let's give it a little bit. That sounded okay to me. I'm not sure if this is located before or after the compressor, but it might be in the manual somewhere. Stereo link, so you can link the detectors. Or unlink them between the left and the right, or mid-side if you have it in mid-side mode. Pan, that's self-explanatory. I don't know why we needed to do that. Got the fast mixes, blend. What else am I missing? Oversampling. Probably I'm missing a whole bunch of stuff here, but anyway, this was not meant to be an exhaustive, systematic look at all the controls. You should just read the manual for that. It's quite an extensive manual. What else do we have here? We've got the similarly. So I know I missed some stuff on here. Similar, you've got your integrated momentary or short-term lifts meter here. But notice in the middle here, instead of like on the compressor, you've got your gain reduction. Here you've got your LRA, which is like your loudness range analyzer. So if I turn this on, LRA is pretty cool. It will tell you the difference between the quiet and the loud parts. Is probably the best way to describe it. It's a thing, look it up, LRA. If you see on analysis plugins, they have like your histogram, your dynamics histogram that sort of follows the song and the different parts and how loud they are compared to one another. That's what this meter here is based on. I don't imagine we're going to see much difference on a loop that just keeps going. We might see some difference here on this. Let's go to this part here, maybe. Might see some difference on a song, on the acoustic song. Or not. Yeah, it changes a bit. Anyway, something to look into, to play with. Down here, of course, your delta controls again, to listen to only what you're changing. Because this EQ's flat, I imagine we're going to hear nothing right now. And sure enough, we've heard nothing. Control lock, and let's just give it some high end. So this is only what that shelf is doing. Or what that... Okay, now it's a shelf. Hear how wide it really is. Fantastic. Let's see, I was listening again for that 600. Right there. You have gone too far. Do not pass go. Do not collect 200. So that's another way to help zone in on the changes that you want to make. Anyway, I think I'm pretty happy with that now. As a first look, polarity controls, master output, spread and pan. Hyper, the different modes, hyper echo digital 2 times, oversampling. Yeah, you know what? I'm good. I think we got a show here. I think that's good for now. And make sure you like, subscribe, and yeah, thanks for watching this. And we will see you next time on Obsessive Audio.